Paul talks about how if he's going to boast about stuff, he's going to boast about the stuff that makes him weak. In today's passage, we continue this theme about how it is God's strength in our weakness. And Paul gives us what I call his resume in this passage. And it's not a resume that we are accustomed to in our culture. Our resumes are how much we are successful, how much we have won. I mean, even in church world, it's this way. In evangelists, it's almost like McDonald's. Over 1 billion saved. Things like that. But with Paul, he gives us a list of everything that went wrong, all of his sufferings, all of his weakness, how he had to, how he was chased out of town, how he spent sleepless nights and went without food and was beaten and left for dead and all these things. But see, Paul was actually quite the successful guy. Before he came to Christ, he was an up and rising star in the religious leader sect that was called the Pharisees, and he was persecuting Christians and killing Christians, and he was making quite the headlines before he came to know Christ. Then he came to know Christ, and he was still making quite the headlines. He was planting churches, and people were getting saved, and he was influential in letting Christians that had their heritage in Judaism realize that Christians that had their heritage in non-Judaism, Gentileism, I guess, all they had to do was find faith in Christ, and he defended that and defended them. But instead of pointing to any of that when he was defending himself to the church that he planted in Corinth, he defended himself to all the things that did not go right. I mean, just imagine that. Imagine our resumes if all we did was talk about how things did not go right. But imagine also a life lived where we didn't have to pretend. We didn't have to have this facade that we had it all put together, that we were all strong, that if and then worry that if people just found out who I really was, they would find out how weak I was. Well, we're going to continue with this passage. It's the next chapter, but it's the same exact thought tomorrow. Just consider a life lived that was vulnerable and honest and wasn't a pretend facade life, and that a life where we could be weak with one another, but be weak with one another in order to see God use his strength.